Yemeni-based Houthi rebels fire missiles at Israel, and the Israeli Defense Force braces for an attack from the Lebanon by Hezbollah forces. I'm Simon Constable. This is Constable Confidential, and we're joined today by Amir Tahari from Paris. He is an author, writer, chairman of the Gatestone Institute in Europe, and a commentator on the Middle East and on terrorism. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Rob.
Let's start with something quite simple. We've had the Houthi rebels firing missiles at Israel. They seem to have been shot down by the Israeli Defense Force. What is your view on what this means for a wider war?
Well, I think it is a symbolic move to, as we say in French, to furnish or cover the lacuna, because the Islamic Republic in Iran has been helping the Houthis with lots of money, lots of arms, and so on. And the Houthis have to do something, to think that the struggle that is happening in Gaza now is between the resistance front, that means the Islamic Republic in Iran, with the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, other terrorist groups, and so on. And not only Hamas. And if you read the Islamic media in Tehran, they always say the war that is now going on between the resistance front and Israel, not only Hamas. So the Houthis have to do something, but it is symbolic because it's militarily meaningless. They can't do anything, but they have to justify their existence and the money that Iran has given them, the arms that Iran has given. As for Hezbollah, they have been also doing some gesticulations. The Tehran media is full of reports that Hezbollah is already fighting, on behalf of the resistance movement. But wait for Friday, when the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, is going to make a big speech on television and say what he is going to do. And this is happening on the eve of the anniversary of the seizure of the American embassy in Tehran, but by pro-Khomeini students. So, they want to sort of link all what is happening in Gaza to the Islamic revolution, to anti-American activities of the students, and so on. And in my opinion, this is because the leadership in Tehran, they don't know what to do. They want to take credit if things turn out well for Hamas and so on, but at the same time, they are scared of getting involved in a bigger fight.
And let's go back to the Hezbollah situation. Hezbollah is a Iranian-backed organization. It basically runs Lebanon, and my understanding is they have 150,000 missiles ready to be fired in the direction of Israel. That sounds like an awful lot of missiles to be shot if they were all shot at once. What is Israel going to do if that happens?
Well, I don't know what Israel will do, but surely Israel will defend itself. As for those 150,000 missiles, there are a variety of things. There are Katyushas in them, there are mid-range missiles, long-range missiles, and I don't know how many of them Hezbollah can actually use. So there is a lot of bluff in that too. At the same time, my feeling is that the Lebanese as a whole, they don't want to get involved in this war. So if Hezbollah is pushed into attacking Israel or joining the war in an active way, it would be under Iranian pressure, not under Hezbollah itself, because Hezbollah has become a big business empire now. The Shiites who were very poor in southern Lebanon, and I used to see them in the 1970s and so on. Now they have become wealthy, they have nice houses, they have businesses, and so on, and they don't want to risk all of that. But at the same time, if Tehran tells them they have to do it, then Hezbollah will have to choose between maintaining its position within Lebanon or subservience to Tehran. It's a very hard choice. But Friday we'll see. In my opinion, I'm not a prophet, although I'm from the Middle East, but my guess is that Hezbollah will try to equivocate it, to try to pretend that they are involved in this war, but not really give the Israelis an excuse to fully attack Lebanon.
Can you talk about what you think the risks of a wider devastating war is across the region? That's something that I know a lot of people are talking about, but we've not seen much evidence of that yet in terms of a major conflict.
I don't see a major conflict because who is interested in doing that? The Iranian regime is shaky, facing increasing opposition inside Iran itself and inside the ruling elite. Militarily, the Islamic Republic could, how shall I say, could do some limited activities, but it's a very vulnerable situation. You know, they don't have a real air force. They don't have the modern weaponry that Israel has, and they will be loser if they get involved. And this is why, you know, they are trying to be in it and out of it. For example, they voted for the recent UN resolution about the two-state solution for Palestine, which means an implicit recognition of Israel. Whereas Ayatollah Khamenei and Khomeini has always talked of wiping Israel off the map and creating a Palestine. But now implicitly they have accepted what Iran had accepted in 1948, which means a de facto recognition of Israel's existence. And at the same time, the demonstrations that they organized in Tehran in support of Hamas were much smaller than the demonstrations you saw in Cairo, in Baghdad, in, I don't know, anywhere else. You know, it was very, very limited because anti-Israelism does not have a big audience in Iran, and the regime knows it. So today, in his speech, Ayatollah Khamenei tried to turn the attention to the Islamic Republic's fight against America. He was constantly attacking America, the great Satan and so on, who has been harming Iran since the 1950s with the coup against Mossadegh and so on, you know, the usual narrative. And surprisingly, very little about Israel. You know, so my feeling is that he wants to appear that he's involved, but at the same time not to get involved. Then who else could get involved in a bigger war? You know, the Persian Gulf Arab states are not interested. Turkey is not interested because Erdogan wants to have his bread buttered on both sides. He's an opportunist. There is nobody, you know, really who wants a big war. Russia itself is bogged down in the Ukraine. It's not easy.
I was talking with a guest a few episodes ago about Iran's role, and I was told that the mullahs in Iran are quite happy to see Arabs die for their cause against Israel rather than put their own people in there. Do you think that rings true?
Yes, you know, because Hamas is a Sunni Muslim group, belongs to the Islamic Brotherhood, and Iran is a Shiite country. So if Shiites and Jews die, of course, Mr. Khamenei, as the self-declared leader of Shiites, would be very happy. And at the same time, you know, from a strategic point of view, if Israel did not exist in the Middle East, all the negative energies of Arabism and pan-Sunnism and pan-Arabism would be against Iran, because we are Shiites, we are heretics, we are Persians. They call us with, you know, Ajam, which means barbarian, and things like that. And Israel has been absorbing these negative feelings of Arabs for ever since its existence. At the same time, Iran has none of the classical disputes that nation states have with each other, with Israel. No border problems, you know, no bad history, no competition over markets, no competition over access to natural resources, you know, none of these things. And there is absolutely no reason why Iran and Israel, as two nations, could be enemies. And both sides, both the Israeli leadership, I've talked to many of them over the years, and the Iranian leadership, including those right now, they understand that. So, the best position for Mr. Khamenei is to say that, to tell the Arabs, forget that I am Shiite, I'm fighting your fight against Israel and the Jews at the same time, but and in the end, be only an observer. The same thing happened in Syria. Iran is involved in Syria. The Islamic Republic is in Syria. But who is fighting there? Afghan mercenaries, Lebanese mercenaries, Pakistani mercenaries, Syrian mercenaries, not Iranians, because Iranians don't want to go and fight for a Muslim Sunni despot like Bashar al-Assad.
And I think that a lot of people will find that a great insight is that the hatred of another part of Islam is as deep as the hatred of the Jewish state. So Israel has been criticized heavily across the world for killing civilians during its attempt to wipe out Hamas. What do you say to that?
Well, what I say to that is that those who say these things, for example, the Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International or Max Planck Institute yesterday, they should know that there are international laws concerning wars, and crimes against humanity. But there is a procedure. If you have an evidence, you cannot be a prosecutor, judge, and jury at the same time. Give your evidence to the International Criminal Court, which has already started an investigation in 2021, long before this thing. And this goes there, and if they find there is a case, there is a procedure, they do it. Otherwise, we could say anything. You and I, Simon, could create an institute, I don't know, for proper observation of wars and declare anything. And this is really very bad. This would undermine the authority of law. There is a procedure. Israel is a member of the United Nations and must conform with the international law. And don't forget that as far as war crimes are concerned, so far, the only countries that have observed the laws of war and have had their citizens tried for war crimes are Israel, the United States, Holland, and the United Kingdom, and nobody else. So, there is the procedure, go and do it. It was done against Serbian military figures in West Africa, against Liberian, against Sierra Leone, and so on. For the time being, how do I know who committed the human rights crime or not?
It's a very important question. With that, it's also known that urban warfare is particularly brutal. It's a very hard place to wage war. Do you think it is even possible for Israel to conduct that urban war and that battle against Hamas without killing civilians?
Well, there is absolutely no war without killing civilians who are the collateral. All wars since the war started include civilians. But the question is whether it is deliberate or not. If you read the Geneva Conventions, it's quite clear. Of course, if you go and attack purely civilian targets, it's a crime, a war crime. But if you attack a military target or a civilian place which has been turned into a military target, for example, hiding your weapons and your fighters in a hospital or in a mosque or in a kindergarten, then who is responsible? The one who is the hiding or the one who is attacking? These are the things that have to be investigated. And so on. Another problem here is that the Geneva Conventions and the international human laws do not cover terrorism because the UN has not agreed on a definition of terrorism. They have had many sessions and debates and so on, but because one man's terrorism is another man's freedom fighter, So, do the laws of war and Geneva Convention, and especially Article 4, also apply to terrorists or not? This is a moot point. We don't know. So, it is easy to jump to conclusions and make judgments, but the reality is more complicated.
Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has said that this war could take a very long time. One thing I know about wars is the longer they take, the less support there is for them as soldiers' bodies come home and parents grieve quite naturally. But the sort of the support for it will likely dwindle over time. How do you think Israelis will react to that if this goes on for a very long time?
I really don't know, but the problem that Israel faces now is that the status quo that was created from 2005 when they evacuated Gaza until 7 October when Hamas attacked has ended. So, Netanyahu or whoever is in charge of Israel should think of an alternative status quo. They haven't thought of that. This is a very big and complex question, because Israel, if they go and occupy Gaza again, they would be in the same position as before 2005, which was unstable and it was a danger for Israel. If they go to the previous status quo, which was shattered by Hamas, it means that they imagine that Gaza is a glacis for Israel, or a security belt for Israel, which was wrong. We know that it was wrong. It was rather a base for attack on Israel. So what are you going to do with, they say, if you break it, you own it. Okay, you have Gaza, you had Gaza before it didn't work, then you left Gaza, it didn't work, and now you get Gaza back again. What is it? What are you going to do?
Other than defeating Hamas, do we know anything about what Israel's plans are for a post-Hamas world or a post-Hamas Israel? What have they made public about that?
Precisely, we don't know anything. I've been trying to find out, but the response is that, oh, no, we are not busy. We have one aim at the moment, that is to destroy Hamas. Okay, that I think that will not take long. It's not going to be a long war. But war is not just firing bullets and fighting in battlefield. War is a situation. And Israel has been in a war situation since its very inception. It has been punctuated by little periods of lukewarm peace, but Israel has always been at war. But the problem is that this is the first time in history that one side wins the wars, but is prevented from cashing its chips, as in a casino, by international opinion, by the United Nations, by the United States. So Israel could again win this war in the classical sense of the term, in the Aristotelian sense of the term, or even in the terms that St. Augustine, the United Nations, the United States, the European Union, the Arab League, and so on, will come and prevent it from doing that. Otherwise, the victory in 1967, had they allowed Israel to cash its chips, would have ended the whole problem. We have had many other wars that have ended with the victory of one side and the defeat of another side. This is the only occasion which the victor has been prevented from using his victory, regardless of who is just or unjust. Because, in a war, you have two sides. You have one winner and one loser. Here, in the case of Israel, the loser is put on the same level and equivalence with the winner. It doesn't work. It means an abuse of war. If you fight a war, you have to fight a war.
Indeed, you do. So America and Austria were urged to give passports to non-national hostages held by Hamas, and they both refused to do that. And we've also got politicians in the UK saying, no, Britain shouldn't take refugees from Gaza. What's your view on that? There seems to be a lot of precedent for issuing passports to people who need refuge. And we saw that with Raoul Wallenberg in Hungary. We saw that with a Japanese diplomat elsewhere during the war, with the Second World War. What are your thoughts on this? What should happen?
Well, it depends on what the country is concerned do. They have full sovereignty and they can decide their own policies. Nobody can deny them from that. But from a humanitarian point of view, of course, I prefer people who are in dire situations to be helped, given shelter and so on. But right now, as we are talking, Simon, Pakistan is expelling 1.6 million Afghan refugees back to Afghanistan, to Taliban, and nobody says anything. We are not even talking about it, you and I, although I just mentioned it. And nobody is offering passports or shelter to them. So why are the Palestinians a special race, a special breed? Do we owe them something special? I don't think so.
Well, I was thinking more about the Jewish hostages in being held by Hamas in Gaza right now. I mean, obviously, we don't know exactly how many are left living, but it's certainly something that 90 years ago people were focused on massively about, should we rescue Jews from the Nazis or not? And it seems to be repeating in that way.
Well, they should be, of course, rescued, but they can have Israeli passports. If they get out of Gaza, they can go to Israel. During the Second World War, for example, Iran negotiated with Hitler that Iranian Jews are Iranians first and not Jews, and therefore they should be protected. And then, if you might know that Iran admitted 150,000 refugees from Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe, many Jews who came through the Soviet Union by giving them shelter in the 1940s during the Second World War. That is quite clear, but will Hamas allow the Jewish hostages to go? Or this is the whole point. So let's not divert attention, start by blaming America or blaming, this is a diversion. We must focus on who is holding these hostages, release them, let them go into Egypt in a camp, and then while they are in the camp, we'll decide where to go. But don't keep hostages as I don't know, bargaining chips for future negotiations with Israel. This is a trick that is always used, instead of blaming the person directly responsible for a tragedy, go and blame America or Austria or whoever.
You live in Paris, and we've seen reports of acts of anti-Semitism, including spray-painted Jewish stars on walls. What are you seeing there? Because sometimes we don't get the whole picture when you see reports in the media.
Well, this morning, the man in charge of fighting anti-Semitism and racism and things like that, who is a government official, announced that since October 7, you have had 846 anti-Semitic acts, and over 200 people have been arrested for that. But the important thing he said, that it was not related directly to 7 October. The trend towards increase in anti-Semitism had started before. Before this, it only is speeding up. The worst thing that has happened is that the leader of the left coalition, Mr. Mélenchon, in France, in Paris, has refused to describe Hamas as a terrorist group, and says that Hamas and Israel should be treated on an equal basis, which is this equivalence itself is a form of anti-Semitism.
Indeed, it would seem to be that way. Thank you very much, Amir Tahari, author, writer, chairman of the Gatestone Institute in Europe, and a commentator on the Middle East and terrorism. Thank you very much for being here. I'm Simon Constable. This is Constable Confidential, and that's it.